My husband David was cheating on me. His mistress, Emily, feeling bold and smug, actually took a photo lounging on my side of our bed and sent it to me. The caption read, "Your husband is sleeping so peacefully in my arms." I just looked at it, managed a small, tight smile, and didn't reply. Instead, my mind immediately went to finding her current boyfriend. I wasn't just going to ruin her reputation. I wanted to make sure both she and David faced serious consequences. On our first wedding anniversary, I had prepared a special dinner and bought gifts, hoping to surprise my husband David. I had no idea that day would become one of the worst days of my life. My name is Sarah, and I work as an ER doctor. It took a lot of arranging to get the day off specifically for our anniversary, but as the evening wore on and the food I'd cooked grew cold, David still hadn't come home. He wasn't replying to my messages on social media, and his phone went straight to voicemail. Outside, the weather turned stormy. Dark clouds gathered, and the wind started to howl, making the windows rattle. Worry started to creep in. I tried calling him again. Just as it was about to ring out, he finally picked up. "Don't wait for me for dinner," he said quickly. "You go ahead and eat." In the background, I heard it. "B0125, please proceed to CT room 2. "Are you at the hospital? Are you hurt?" The familiar automated voice of the hospital announcement system sent a chill right through me. "Are you at our hospital?" I asked urgently. "Don't come here, Before David could finish his sentence, I hung up and rushed out the door towards the hospital. The drive there felt like an eternity. My mind raced, imagining all sorts of terrible scenarios. Was he injured? His head? His chest? Was it serious? Why hadn't he called me immediately? I'm an ER doctor. Ever since we got married, anytime he or a relative had a medical issue, he always contacted me right away. Or maybe, had he gotten into another argument on the road? He had a bad temper sometimes when driving. Maybe he'd hit someone and was too afraid to tell me. When I finally reached the CT room and saw David standing there, completely unharmed, a wave of relief washed over me. As long as he was okay, that was the main thing. But then I saw what he was doing, and I froze. My husband was gently wiping tears from the face of a young woman, speaking to her in a soft, comforting voice, telling her everything would be all right. After he finished speaking, he gave the back of her head a light, reassuring pat. "What are you two doing?" Anger flared up inside me, and I stepped forward, confronting them directly. David looked startled for a split second, but he quickly composed himself, his expression turning annoyed. "Didn't I tell you not to come?" he snapped. "You don't answer messages or calls? What's wrong with you?" The weather outside was terrible, with strong winds. I'd almost gotten into an accident on the way over here in my panic, but instead of showing any concern, he was scolding me. The tension in the air was thick. His sharp tone made my eyes sting, like I was the one who had done something wrong. The young woman beside him stood up shakily, trying desperately to explain. "Sis," she started, her voice trembling. "I'm really sorry. Please don't misunderstand. The wind was so strong today. Right when I left the office, a sign fell and hit me." Only then did I notice a small bruise on her forehead. Her face was pale and she looked terrified, as if I were deliberately picking on her. David happened to see it and insisted on bringing me to the hospital. She looked young, pretty, and very pitiful. I recognized her vaguely. She worked at David's company. I thought her name was Emily. Towards the end of her explanation, Emily sounded like she was about to cry. She glanced cautiously at David. "David, maybe you should explain? Don't let an outsider like me cause problems in your marriage." As she said this, I noticed her hand lightly tugged at the sleeve of David's shirt. David frowned, looking impatient. "What is there to explain? There's nothing going on between us. Sarah, why are you making such a scene?" He glared at me, seeming genuinely angry. Was I really overreacting? Or was his anger just a cover for guilt? My chest felt heavy, painful, like something was crushing it. This was the first time since we'd met that he had ever spoken to me so harshly, and it was all because of this woman I barely knew. Their small gestures, the comforting touch, the slight tug on his sleeve, suddenly seemed magnified in my mind. David's uncharacteristic anger actually helped cool my own emotions slightly, making me realize his behavior today was definitely not normal. However, I didn't have any real proof. If I kept pressing the issue based only on suspicion, I'd just look unreasonable and put myself in a weaker position. And something told me Emily wasn't as innocent as she appeared. I forced down my frustration and hurt, took David's arm, and managed to smile towards Emily. I trust my husband, I said, trying to sound calm. Please don't misunderstand. But you should know, my husband has one weakness. He's just too kind-hearted sometimes and finds it hard to say no to people who need help. Before David could react, I pulled him away. As we walked off, I glanced back and saw Emily's previously innocent and pitiful expression harden into something sour. Once you suspect something, that seed of doubt takes root and grows whether you want it to or not. I knew I needed time to investigate properly. As soon as we were out of the ER entrance, I dropped David's arm and walked quickly towards the car. I couldn't keep up the pretense anymore. Big, cold raindrops started to fall, chilling me both inside and out. David hurried to keep up, his voice laced with frustration. Sarah, haven't you made enough trouble for one night? Think about how awkward you just made things for me and my colleague at work. I stared straight ahead, walking faster, and angrily pulled open the car door. Just as I was about to get in the driver's seat, David snatched the keys out of my hand. His expression was stern, but his voice softened slightly. You've already upset her and embarrassed her. That's enough. We'd already had a scene. Was it really necessary to drag it out? But the anger was still burning inside me. Why did a situation that felt like his fault somehow turn into me being dramatic and unreasonable? Throughout the whole encounter, he hadn't shown any concern for my feelings. I moved over to the passenger seat, slammed the door shut, and buckled my seatbelt. The wind outside had calmed a bit, but the rain was now hammering against the windows, the noise echoing the turmoil in my head. Maybe I really was misunderstanding him. He was tall, good-looking, seemed mature and responsible, and had a decent job. It wasn't completely unreasonable that a younger woman might develop a crush on him. As long as he maintained proper boundaries, marriage isn't always easy. Maintaining it takes effort from both sides. But then, what he said next completely shattered any lingering positive thoughts I had tried to hold on to. She's just a kid from a tough background, really pitiful. You don't need to take her seriously. She's pretty naive. Everyone at the company treats her like a little sister. I glanced sideways at him. Does treating her like a sister involve patting her head? I asked coolly. Does it involve her sneaking glances at you, pulling your shirt sleeve with adoration practically shining in her eyes? Do you think I didn't see that? I remembered the brief moment I'd witnessed at the hospital. The anger I'd tried to suppress surged again. She has a boyfriend, okay? David's face turned cold. Stop overthinking things and making up stories. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal and the car lurched forward. He started driving faster and faster, completely ignoring the worsening weather and poor visibility. Suddenly, he slammed on the brakes, throwing me forward sharply against the seatbelt. Before I could even react, he rolled down his window, letting in the cold wind and rain, and started yelling curses at someone outside. Are you trying to get yourself killed crossing the street like that? Luckily, the brakes had worked and no one was hit, though the pedestrian was clearly shaken. It was a middle-aged woman. I quickly got out of the car to check on her. Are you all right? Do you need me to take you to the hospital? Even though she wore a raincoat, her face and legs were soaked. She hastily shook her head, bowing slightly in apology. I'm so sorry. There's an emergency at home. I thought crossing quickly would save time. I didn't mean to be reckless. After apologizing again, she hurried off on her electric bike. Getting back into the car, my heart was still pounding. David's face remained dark with anger. He didn't speak or look at me, but he drove a little slower now. As the sky grew darker, I stared out the window, lost in thought. If he hadn't braked in time, or if the pedestrian hadn't been in such a hurry to leave, things could have gotten very ugly. If it had been a large, confrontational man instead of a flustered, middle-aged woman, even if she was technically at fault for crossing improperly, the consequences could have been severe. And all of this near miss was because of his completely irrational anger. Anger that was clearly aimed at me, a performance meant to shut me up. If I kept questioning him about his relationship with Emily, would he have intentionally caused an accident next time? By doing this, he could frighten me into silence, diverting attention from his own questionable behavior. Afterwards, he'd casually excuse it. You provoked me. You know I get angry when I drive. He knew my personality well, playing on my tendency to avoid conflict. But his selfishness and coldness in that moment truly startled me, sending a cold sweat down my back. It felt like I didn't really know this man at all. For both our sakes, I realized I had to suppress my anger and doubts for now, hide my unhappiness on this stormy anniversary night. Back home, David finally noticed the uneaten dinner and the cake on the table. He seemed to finally remember it was our first wedding anniversary. I had the day off, and that morning I had asked him, "Do you have plans for dinner tonight? If not, let's just eat at home." He'd agreed readily. I had thought maybe he was pretending not to know, planning his own surprise. But no, he had simply forgotten. All the effort I'd put into preparing things for him now felt pointless and almost laughable. "Darling, I'm sorry," he said, trying to approach me for a hug. "We were both too sensitive today." I sidestepped him. A flicker of guilt crossed his face. "I'll heat up the food, and we can cut the cake." We ate in silence, both preoccupied with our own thoughts. The reheated food wasn't nearly as good as it had been fresh, much like our marriage, I thought bleakly. Our first anniversary, the paper anniversary. Was our marriage truly as fragile as paper? After showering, I lay in bed, pretending to be asleep. Soon, I heard the familiar click of a medicine bottle being opened. His melatonin pills, which he took regularly, usually earlier in the evening. After a while, I felt the mattress dip beside me. I didn't move, focusing on keeping my breathing slow and even. David leaned over as if to kiss me, but when I didn't respond, he pulled back. We both lay there, knowing the other was likely awake. Eventually, his breathing became steady and deep. He was asleep. But my mind was wide awake. The seeds of doubt planted earlier wouldn't let me rest. I tossed and turned silently. I knew I couldn't just let this go. I had to find out the truth. Pretending to shift in my sleep, I carefully draped my leg over David's body. He was sleeping so soundly, he didn't stir. Very carefully, I reached over, grabbed his phone from the bedside table, and tiptoed out of the bedroom into the study. I expected his phone to be locked with a new password, but surprisingly, it opened easily. His password hadn't changed. For a moment, I hesitated. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Taking a deep breath, I decided to check anyway. If I found nothing, I could always apologize later for snooping. I scrolled through his messages, searching for typical suspicious keywords like miss you, love you, good night, hotel. Apart from my own conversations with him, there was nothing out of the ordinary. I checked his bank transactions. No strange transfers or payments. His digital wallet showed nothing unusual. I looked through his photo albums and social media feeds. No intimate photos with anyone else. Maybe I really was overthinking it. I let out a sigh of relief. In his company's group chat list, I found Emily's contact. He had saved her name normally, using her full name. Nothing seemed off there either, but then I noticed, why was their entire chat history deleted? And why was her chat specifically set to do not disturb? That felt too deliberate, too suspicious. I closed my eyes, trying to calm down, but my mind kept replaying the scene at the hospital. David's gentle expression as he looked at Emily, her shy tug on his sleeve, the resentful look she gave me as I led David away. These images circled in my head, making my chest feel tight. Even without finding explicit messages, a deep sense of disappointment settled over me. The air in the study felt heavy, suffocating. Taking another deep breath, I decided to put the phone away. As I moved to close the apps, my finger hovered over the icon for a popular online shopping app he used. On impulse, I opened it and checked his order history. Pending deliveries, recent payments, past reviews. Everything looked normal. Is he just incredibly careful, or have I truly misunderstood everything? My finger rested on a recent order, a pair of shoes he'd bought. I looked at it, feeling foolish. Maybe I was just too sensitive. As I went to exit the app, my thumb accidentally brushed the More option in the corner of the screen. A menu popped up and one option caught my eye: deleted orders. A strange feeling crept over me. I clicked on it. A confirmation box appeared. Confirm delete this order. Deleted orders can be recovered from the order recycle bin on the computer version. My palms started to feel slightly sweaty. I turned on the desktop computer in the study. The low hum of the machine suddenly sounded very loud, making me nervous. I glanced towards the study door, listened intently, but heard nothing from the bedroom. Still uneasy, I slipped off my shoes, crept out of the study, and tiptoed to the bedroom door, which I'd left slightly ajar. Leaning against the wall, heart pounding in my ears, I held my breath and listened. All I could hear was David's steady, rhythmic snoring. Quietly, I retreated back to the study. I logged into the shopping app on the computer, navigated to my orders, found the order recycle bin, and clicked Restore Deleted Orders. Then, I went back to the main My Orders page. Lines upon lines of purchase history appeared on the screen. I stared, stunned. Luxurious couples' rings I had never seen, let alone worn. Various expensive designer handbags I didn't own. Sets of revealing lingerie that were definitely not my style. My mind unwillingly filled in the blanks, imagining the scenes associated with these gifts. Sweetness, intimacy, excitement. My hand holding the mouse started to shake. All the trust, all the feelings built up from the time we dated, fell in love, got engaged, and married for a year. It all crumbled in that instant. I covered my mouth, trying desperately not to make a sound, tears blurring my vision. I almost regretted checking his phone. If only he had changed his password. After about 5 minutes, I wiped my eyes, took another deep breath, and forced myself to regain composure. Now was not the time to fall apart. I needed evidence. He had hidden this so carefully. I had to be prepared. I picked up my own phone and started taking pictures of each incriminating order record, then recorded a video panning through the entire list. My hands trembled the whole time, my heart pounding against my ribs. As I documented everything, I noticed something else. Some of the recipient names, phone numbers, and delivery addresses listed on these orders weren't mine, David's, or his workplace. They could only belong to his mistress. I saved her phone number from one of the orders and searched for it on a popular messaging app. The profile picture that popped up was an anime character, the exact same one used for the contact saved as Emily in David's phone. The username associated with the number, however, was Rainy_for_you. Everything clicked into place. My world, my marriage, felt like it was collapsing around me. Methodically, I went back through the restored orders on the computer and deleted each one again. With every click, it felt like a piece of my heart was being torn out, a reflection of their betrayal. The system moved the records back to the recycle bin. I tidied up the study, turned off the computer, and went back to the bedroom. David's snoring now sounded incredibly grating. I lay back down on my side of the bed. In his sleep, he murmured, "Darling," and reached out an arm to pull me closer. It was something he always did, especially if we'd had a disagreement. That closeness usually melted away my anger, but this time was different. We could never go back to how things were. Instinctively, I shifted away towards the very edge of the bed, almost falling off. He didn't pursue, just turned over and fell back into a deep sleep. Looking at his familiar back, he suddenly seemed like a stranger, someone disgusting. I couldn't understand why he would cheat. I considered myself reasonably attractive, especially with makeup. I was generally gentle, kind, had my own career, handled social situations well, and was a decent cook. We had met through mutual friends, dated for a year before getting serious. He seemed mature, steady, was tall and handsome, and had always been incredibly affectionate and romantic towards me. He'd even said meeting me felt like finding what he'd been missing his whole life. We loved each other. We felt like soulmates. Getting married wasn't impulsive. It felt like the natural next step. Before we got married, I had even jokingly told him that if he ever fell in love with someone else, I would let him go, but he had to tell me first, even just a second before it happened. He had patted my head affectionately and said, "Darling, loving you for a lifetime won't be enough." Now, just 1 year into our marriage, those words felt hollow and ironic. He could stop loving me, he could love someone else, but he should never have betrayed our vows, our marriage, cheating on me behind my back. His snoring eventually quieted down. For a fleeting dark moment, I felt an urge to hurt him, but then I pushed the thought away. He wasn't worth ruining my own life over. Still, just letting him go felt too easy. A fire of anger burned inside me, making it impossible to relax. But I knew I had to sleep. I needed rest to think clearly, to plan how to make him pay. That night, my sleep was filled with nightmares, but at least I got some rest. The next morning, I made a simple breakfast and sat at the table, finding no appetite. I knew that from now on, I would have to live wearing a mask. Divorce kept echoing in my thoughts, a recurring theme from my dreams, but it was such a huge step. How would I explain it to my parents? They were getting older. What if the shock was too much for them? Why are you up so early? David emerged from the bedroom, half asleep, yawning, and tried to embrace me. I stiffened, my body automatically rejecting his touch. He looked slightly disappointed, but leaned down to give me a kiss on the forehead anyway. Still mad about yesterday? His deep voice with that familiar coaxing tone, his eyes full of apparent affection, it all felt so fake, so ironic now. But I couldn't let him suspect I knew. I forced myself to endure his touch, managed a weak smile. He always counted on my inability to resist his affection, but that was before he had crossed this line. If you love and protect me wholeheartedly, I thought grimly, I don't care who or what you are. But if you betray me like this, I'll make sure your life becomes a living hell. When you get some time off, let's celebrate our anniversary properly, he said, sitting down and starting to eat, watching me closely. And maybe we should start trying for a baby soon. When we first got married, he had said he wanted to focus on his career for a couple more years, pay off the mortgage on the apartment he was buying before we had kids. He didn't want me or the child to struggle financially, he'd said. I was touched by his thoughtfulness back then and had even offered to help pay the mortgage payments with him. The apartment he was buying was a pre-sale property, not even built yet. He had only made the down payment before our wedding. We couldn't live there, and the monthly payments were significant. With the recent economic uncertainty, I hadn't wanted him to feel too much pressure. Besides, we were married, planning to spend our lives together. Being overly precise about finances seemed unnecessary and potentially damaging to the relationship. Now I felt incredibly grateful for that decision to postpone having children. My emotions were a tangled mess, but I couldn't let him see. Forcing another smile, I thought for a moment before replying. We're really short-staffed at the hospital right now. Dr. Emma is about to go on maternity leave, so she can't cover night shifts anymore. Our plans for a baby might have to wait at least another 6 months. I thought I saw a flicker of relief in his eyes, though he quickly covered it with a look of disappointment. Does your hospital even care about its employees? They want to control when you have kids, too? I gave an awkward smile. You know how emergency medicine is. Pregnancies have to be planned and reported well in advance. Okay, 6 months then, he conceded. But if you do get pregnant, you should stop working immediately. You're too exhausted every day. We can't risk the baby's health. I'll support you financially. I nodded and smiled, relieved to end the topic. I'd never been so thankful for the demanding nature of my job. 6 months, that would be enough time. After breakfast, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, David came up behind me, acting very attentive, trying to help. In the past, this would have made me feel happy and cherished. Now, I just felt numb, indifferent. Suddenly, he wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my neck. Babe, he murmured, I'll make it up to you properly when we both have time off. I didn't respond. In his mind, I was probably still just sulking about the hospital incident. Actually, he continued, his tone shifting slightly, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. Our current 2-bedroom apartment is a bit small. If you get pregnant and my mom comes to help out, it'll be really crowded. I didn't turn around, kept scrubbing a plate, but I could feel my grip tightening, my knuckles white. What do you think? He hadn't noticed my reaction, his voice gaining a slight excitement. I looked at a 4-bedroom place recently. Great location, good school district. How about we sell this apartment to use as a down payment? So that was it. All the morning's attentiveness, the talk about babies. It was all leading up to this. The apartment David and I were currently living in was a wedding gift from my parents. Since the apartment David was buying wasn't ready, my parents didn't want me to live in a rental or feel unsettled, so they bought this place for us. To save David face, they told everyone his family had bought it. In the year since we'd been married, my parents never brought it up, treating him like their own son, believing that being kind to their son-in-law was being kind to me. They never imagined some people are just ungrateful and calculating. If I hadn't discovered his affair last night, I might have naively agreed, turning my premarital asset into joint marital property. We're a couple, I would have thought. Everything should be shared. Current housing prices aren't great, I said, pretending to consider it, trying to keep my voice steady. Selling now might mean taking a loss. Besides, we haven't finished paying off the mortgage on your place yet, have we? Would the bank even approve another loan right now? I suppressed my anger, feigning hesitation. I've done the calculations, he pressed. This apartment could sell for over $800,000. We'd still need about $600,000 for the new place. Even with our savings, there's a gap. Maybe we could ask your parents? He rushed on. If you get pregnant, moving and renovating would be bad for the baby. And my place won't be ready for another 2 years. The place I saw is really great, good schools nearby, convenient for the child's future. As he spoke, he leaned in and kissed my cheek. His attempt at flattery was painfully obvious. When he said parents, he clearly meant my parents, not his. I need to think about such a big decision, I said, unable to keep the coldness completely out of my voice. My expression must have hardened too. All right, he said, sensing the shift. Well, I'm off to work. After David left, I stood at the sink for a long time, letting the water run, feeling disgusted where he had kissed me. I didn't have the energy to finish the dishes. My heart felt heavy. He had planned this all out, using the idea of a child in a good school district as bait, even intending to rely on my parents financially. I felt a wave of gratitude that I had checked his phone last night. Otherwise, I would still be naively trusting him, maybe even helping him achieve his selfish goals. I started to doubt everything. Was his reason for marrying me really the deep connection he always claimed? Or was it something else? I remembered my parents complaining about the unresolved issue of his apartment before the wedding. I hadn't cared back then. I had even foolishly considered adding his name to the deed of my parents' pre-wedding gift apartment to prove my absolute love and trust. My brother had strongly disagreed, calling me naive. We'd had a huge fight about it, and I'd thought he was just being difficult or jealous. In the end, my parents suggested a compromise. Wait 3 years, and if I still felt the same way, they wouldn't object. Was David really that desperate to secure his financial future through me? Or had I just been completely blind? Or was he just incredibly good at hiding his true intentions? I turned off the faucet, grabbed my bag, and drove straight to my brother's apartment. I was scheduled for the night shift today, which meant I had the day free. I needed to talk to someone. I didn't want to just sit around, but I felt hesitant about involving my brother Alex. Before the wedding, he hadn't been overly enthusiastic about my marrying David, maintaining a somewhat neutral stance. Standing downstairs from his apartment building, I fidgeted, unsure if I should tell him. As I was debating with myself, Alex came walking back from getting breakfast, dressed casually in shorts and a tank top. He spotted me immediately, dragged me inside, and knew something was wrong just by looking at my face. His usual playful demeanor vanished, replaced by a serious concern. What's happened? David, he cheated on me. As soon as the words were out, I burst into tears. Alex threw the breakfast he was carrying onto the floor, stormed into his kitchen, grabbed a large kitchen knife, and headed for the door. I grabbed onto him with all my strength, using every last bit of energy I had. Alex, please! I cried out. I don't have a home anymore. Don't make things worse. He froze, threw the knife down onto the ground with a clang, and started pacing angrily around his living room. After a long silence, he stopped and looked at me, his expression grim. Sarah, if you forgive him after this, don't ever call me your brother again. He looked incredibly worried, but I could see he was trying hard to control his own anger for my sake. My brother Alex is 3 years older than me. Growing up, he loved teasing me, but he was always protective. He's still single, claiming he hasn't met the right person and doesn't want to settle. I used to tease him about being afraid of commitment. Today, I understood his cautiousness better. He could tease me, but he wouldn't let anyone else hurt me. The house. Did he trick you into putting his name on it? He asked sharply. I shook my head mutely. Okay, good. At least you have some sense left. He sighed, relieved. So, what do you want to do now? Alex pulled me onto the sofa beside him and gently wiped the tears from my face. Crying won't fix this. As he said it, his own eyes looked suspiciously red. I don't want to just let him get away with it, I said, my voice trembling but firm. My nose tingled, but I fought back fresh tears, clenching my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I want to make him pay. I want him to go through hell. I'd never felt so determined in my life. Alex, can you help me? He nodded solemnly, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. And, I added, please don't tell Mom and Dad about this yet. During my night shift, I sent David a message, telling him I wanted him to come with me to my parents' house the day after my shift ended, on my day off. He replied quickly, sounding very pleased. He probably thought I was going to talk to my parents about selling the apartment and buying the new house. In reality, I just needed those 2 days to calm down myself and figure out the best way to execute my plan for revenge. Though Alex usually seemed laid back, he was incredibly efficient when he set his mind to something, just like how he ran his own business successfully despite recent challenges. Using his connections, he quickly gathered a thick file of information. When he handed it to me, I was still amazed at how fast he'd worked. The file contained everything about Emily, her family situation, an older sister, a younger brother, given away to relatives as a child due to poverty and parental preference for boys, only taken back as an adult. Her personality traits, suspicious, sensitive, vindictive, constantly drained by her family but seemingly compliant. And detailed information about her current fiancé, Ben, including his phone number and social media handle. And I remembered David mentioning Emily's difficult background before, her lack of higher education, and how she made frequent mistakes when she first started at his company, requiring him to fix them. At the time, I had advised him to be patient, saying young people often struggle and need guidance, just like we did when we were fresh out of medical school. Later, he stopped mentioning her as often, and I hadn't thought much of it. I never imagined his guidance and care had extended into an affair. Her background might be unfortunate, but it didn't excuse her actions in wrecking my marriage. As I flipped through the documents Alex had gathered, I noticed her medical records were included. On impulse, I logged into our hospital's electronic medical record system. Even though we're in a relatively small town, I work at the main hospital where most people come for treatment. I searched for appointments under Emily's name within the past year. Several records popped up. Matching her age and ID number, I printed out the relevant ones. I felt a grim sense of gratitude for the hospital policy, granting the ER broad access to patient records for urgent situations. Carefully examining the printouts, I saw Emily had multiple visits to the gynecologist for severe menstrual pain, and several visits to the ear, nose, and throat clinic for recurring nosebleeds, often happening close together. Suddenly, I remembered David taking melatonin every single night. An idea began to form in my mind, a plan for revenge, almost perfect in its cruelty. I wanted them both to fall into ruin, to despair forever. As soon as my shift ended the next morning, I left the hospital immediately. Today I had someone to meet, Ben, Emily's fiancé. When I first saw him, he looked exactly as Alex's report described. Simple, honest, perhaps a bit socially awkward, a typical technician type. When I laid out all the evidence I had gathered, the deleted shopping orders, the saved phone number, the matching profile pictures, his face twisted in disbelief. He accused me of slander, insisting Emily would never do such a thing. Right now, I said quietly, feeling a strange mix of pity for him and irony about my own situation, I believe your girlfriend is still at my house. Do you have cameras? Surveillance? Ben asked, still grasping at straws, hoping for proof I was wrong. It all happened too suddenly, I sighed, feigning helplessness. I didn't have time to set anything up. So it's all just your speculation, he retorted, trying to sound firm. I trust my girlfriend. I won't let some stranger's baseless accusations ruin our relationship. He seemed to have gathered his courage to say this. I took out my phone and opened the app connected to my smart body fat scale at home. I skipped past the metabolic rate and muscle mass data, focusing on the weight log. Last night at 8 p.m., I showed him, the scale registered 45 kilograms. At 11 p.m., it registered 46 kilograms. This morning at 7:30 a.m., it was back down to 44 kilograms. They must have had a late night snack or something. I looked at Ben calmly. If you still don't believe me, you can call her right now and check. His expression shifted from disbelief to hesitation, then dawning doubt. After a tense minute or two, he finally pulled out his phone and dialed Emily's number, putting it on speakerphone. "What's up?" A sweet, slightly lazy female voice answered, sounding playful. It was definitely Emily. "Isn't today the weekend? I miss you. Let's meet up," Ben said, clearly testing her, though I could hear the faint hope still in his voice. "Oh, but I have a cold," Emily replied quickly. "Wait a few days until I feel better, then I'll come find you. I don't want to get you sick." She deliberately sniffed and coughed twice for effect. "Then I'll come over to your dorm and bring you some medicine," Ben pressed, his face hardening. "No, no need," Emily said hastily. "I've gone back to my parents' home. I'll come see you after work on Monday, okay?" We both heard the unmistakable note of panic in her voice as she tried to cover her tracks. "All right," Ben said flatly. "I have to work overtime these next 2 days anyway. See you Monday." He hung up. "She said she went back home," Ben murmured, almost to himself, a deep sadness entering his eyes. "Not that she was at home." He looked up at me. "Why are you telling me all this? And why do you have that kind of scale at home?" "The scale? I was thinking about trying to get pregnant soon," I lied smoothly. "So I got this smart scale to monitor my health better, hoping for a healthier pregnancy. But it turned out useful for this instead." I let my voice tremble slightly. "I wanted to save my marriage, but your girlfriend doesn't seem interested in letting that happen." As I spoke, I secretly pinched my thigh hard, forcing tears into my eyes, making myself look like a desperate wife trying to cling to her husband. In our society, men who cheat are often forgiven, especially if they seem remorseful. But when a man is cheated on, it's a different story. Forgiveness is much harder to come by, regardless of his background or status. "Take me there," Ben said, his voice low and determined. I kept my expression sad and heartbroken, but inside I was smiling. People are strange. No one wants to believe something like this could happen to them. At first, they deny it. But once confronted with proof, curiosity, and often a desire for revenge takes over. The cheaters, caught up in the thrill, rarely consider the consequences, arrogantly assuming they've hidden their tracks perfectly. I gently turned the doorknob to my apartment, and the scene that greeted me in the living room is one I will never forget. Emily was wearing my favorite dress. She and David were disheveled, flushed, clearly interrupted mid-act on my sofa. They heard the noise and turned their heads simultaneously. Our eyes met. Even though I knew David was cheating, even though I had mentally prepared myself on the way over, even though I had tried to persuade Ben just to focus on getting Emily out of there, seeing them together so shamelessly, so blatantly, in my own home, it was still incredibly hard to stomach. Life can be brutally cruel. David scrambled to pull up his shorts. Emily froze, stunned. Before I could even process my own reaction, I saw Ben rush past me. The sharp sound of a slap echoed through the room. He had hit Emily hard. "Weren't you supposed to have a cold?" he roared, his voice filled with rage. "Weren't you supposed to be back at your parents' home?" "Let me explain. There's a misunderstanding." Emily didn't even bother covering her stinging cheek, frantically trying to straighten her dress, stuttering. But halfway through, she apparently realized she couldn't lie her way out of this and abruptly changed her story. "This is the first time I was forced into it." That last sentence was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Ben immediately turned his fury on David, launching himself at him, fists flying. David, initially confused and ashamed, quickly started fighting back. The two men wrestled fiercely, punches and kicks landing indiscriminately. As the fight escalated, they started grabbing nearby objects to use as weapons. The scene descended into chaos. The glass coffee table shattered on the floor with a loud crash. I pulled out my phone and started recording. It was a shame I hadn't managed to place the voice recorder I'd prepared the day before. Everything had happened too fast when we first entered. Now Ben fought like a wild animal, his eyes bloodshot. Even with Emily trying feebly to pull him off, David was clearly losing. Ben was younger, stronger, and fueled by righteous anger. Emily, caught in the middle trying to stop them both, ended up getting shoved and hit accidentally. Both enraged men seemed to blame her for the situation. Whichever man she tried to help, she ended up angering the other. In a few short minutes, the living room was wrecked. The front door hadn't been closed properly, and the noise attracted neighbors who crowded the doorway, murmuring and pointing. Some started recording videos on their phones, while others called the police, adding to the general confusion. Finally, exhausted, Ben and David staggered apart, the fight sputtering out. Ben, though the clear victor, showed no triumph, just stood panting heavily, still glaring at Emily, who was now huddled in a corner, looking as if he wanted to tear her apart. Emily buried her head in her knees, trembling and crying softly, acting like the victim of some terrible injustice. David, looking like a defeated dog, gasped for breath, his forehead swelling, bruises already forming on his face and arms, though miraculously his nose seemed untouched. On the way over, I had casually mentioned to Ben that working in the ER, I'd seen plenty of fights. I'd noted that skilled fighters often manage to inflict pain and vent their anger without causing injuries that lead to serious charges, avoiding things like broken noses or ruptured eardrums, which are particularly fragile. I stopped recording on my phone and watched the premature end of the drama unfold coldly. What a pity. Ben hadn't hit him hard enough. That scumbag David hadn't suffered nearly enough. Emily's reaction today was also slightly disappointing. She seemed much weaker than I'd anticipated. Perhaps Ben's presence intimidated her from showing her true, spiteful colors. Sensing the relative quiet, Emily stopped crying and looked up. Her face, smeared with blood from a split lip and tears, looked pathetic and slightly ridiculous. I allowed my lips to curl into a mocking, deliberate smile. Instantly, the innocent, wide-eyed look she usually affected vanished, replaced by a glare full of resentment and malice. Staggering to her feet, she advanced towards me. "You set this all up, didn't you?" she hissed. I immediately put on an innocent, panicked expression, my voice trembling with fake grievance. "You seduced my husband, you ruined my family, you slept in my bed, and now you're blaming me?" My hands were clenched into tight fists behind my back. If she dared lay a finger on me, I was ready to defend myself forcefully. I feigned fear, partly because I wanted to see how David would react. Would he protect me or her? He hesitated. As Emily lunged towards me, David didn't move a muscle. He actually looked at Emily with something resembling pity in his eyes. In that moment, I saw David, the man I once loved, with absolute clarity. Fine, I thought. If that's how it is, don't blame me for what comes next. "You bitch!" Emily screamed, finally losing control, raising her hand to strike me like a mad woman. "David should have divorced you long ago." I was ready. I swung my arm and slapped her hard across the face before her hand could connect. Then, using the momentum, I slapped her again with the back of my hand. "Good hit!" someone shouted from the crowd of neighbors at the door. "Seducing someone's husband, wrecking their home, and then acting so arrogant." Emily seemed stunned that I had fought back. She just stood there, dazed, her face already starting to swell, tears of humiliation welling in her eyes. But she didn't dare say another word. If she had continued her aggression, the onlookers might have intervened more forcefully. "Emily, haven't you embarrassed yourself enough?" Ben growled, grabbing her arm with such force that she stumbled and fell to the floor. "They're all bullying me. They set me up. Can't you see that, Ben?" she shrieked from the floor. "Ben, you're being used by that bitch, Sarah. I'm the victim here, and you're not even helping me. You hit me, after everything I've done for you." She dissolved into loud theatrical sobs. At this point, David finally stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of me. He pointed a finger at Emily's face and cursed her viciously. "I told you already. Don't try to seduce me. Don't wreck my family. All along, I've only ever loved my wife." Emily choked on her sobs, looking utterly shocked into silence by his sudden betrayal. Outside, police sirens grew louder. The people at the door continued to mutter and curse, some aimed at the shameless mistress, others at the ungrateful scumbag husband. There were also murmurs of sympathy for me and for Ben. Hearing the sirens and facing rejection from both men, Emily seemed truly terrified now. Her face went pale. Without even grabbing her purse or shoes, she scrambled to get up and run, As she passed me, I stuck out my foot. She tripped and fell flat on her face. "Take off your skirt," I said mockingly, looking down at her sprawled on the floor. It was my skirt she was wearing. Emily looked furious but also desperate. She had no choice. She quickly wriggled out of the skirt. I picked it up, threw it at her face, and said in an icy, calm voice, "Don't leave your worn clothes here to disgust me. Trash belongs in the trash can." The police arrived and ended up taking all four of us down to the station to give statements. In the end, since it was technically a domestic dispute with mutual assault, we all agreed to mediation to avoid pressing charges. After signing the agreement, we went our separate ways. Soon, the whole incident became the talk of the neighborhood. On the walk back to our apartment, I maintained a stony silence, refusing to even look at David. As neighbors saw us, the whispers and pointing started. Their words towards me were sympathetic, pitying. Towards David, they were filled with cold sarcasm and judgment, clearly hitting their mark. David looked furious but didn't dare respond, his face flushing red and then paling white by turns. It was quite satisfying to watch. As soon as we got inside our apartment, the door clicking shut behind us, David dropped to his knees with a thud. He clutched at my legs, begging, "I was wrong, Sarah, I was wrong. Emily seduced me. Please forgive me." I looked down at him kneeling amidst the wreckage of our living room and found the whole scene darkly amusing. "Let's get a divorce," I said calmly. "No, I don't agree to a divorce," he cried desperately. "We have feelings for each other. I made a mistake, yes, but who doesn't have problems in their marriage? Let's just look forward, okay?" I squatted down and slowly, deliberately, pried his fingers off my legs one by one. "If you knew this would happen," I asked quietly, "why did you do it in the first place?" David panicked. Large beads of sweat rolled down his bruised and swollen forehead. It was a pathetic sight. He quickly grabbed his phone, sent a vicious voice message to Emily, and then, right in front of me, deleted all her contact information, her number, her chat history, everything. "I swear," he vowed, looking up at me earnestly, "I will never have anything to do with her again." His fierce determination was almost frightening. Before being caught, he had hidden everything so well, even accusing me of being paranoid, making me feel guilty. Just last night, he and Emily were together in this very apartment. Even just an hour ago, when Emily lunged at me, he hadn't immediately stepped in to protect me. Now, the moment I mentioned divorce, he instantly cut ties with her, switching allegiance without hesitation. Did he sincerely want my forgiveness? Or was this just a tactic? A way to stall for time until he could find a way to get rid of me later, perhaps after securing financial advantage. After all, he hadn't yet managed to get his name on my premarital property. All our joint savings were currently in accounts I controlled. The mortgage on the apartment he was buying still needed to be paid. Or maybe, realizing things with Emily were truly over, he weighed his options and decided I was still useful. Perhaps he believed that in our society, a cheating man who kneels and begs deserves forgiveness from his wife. He thought he knew me so well. But he didn't realize that the moment he betrayed our marriage, the Sarah who loved him unconditionally, the Sarah who could be easily swayed by his affections, ceased to exist. I needed to see him fall. He had to pay for what he did. Today was just the beginning. I closed the guest room door behind me, locking it. Today's confrontation had been somewhat impulsive, triggered earlier than I might have planned. When it came to infidelity, I always believed the primary fault lay with the partner who broke their vows. Even if Emily had initiated contact, if David had known how to refuse, none of this would have happened. But Emily had crossed a line herself. Early that morning, after my night shift, she had added me on Instagram and posted a story visible only to me. It was a picture taken from my side of our bed, showing her lying next to a man whose back was to the camera. But it was unmistakably David. The caption read, "What's stolen tastes best." She was retaliating for the scene at the hospital 2 days prior, where I had walked off arm in arm with David, leaving her looking abandoned. That likely triggered her own abandonment issues, fueling her spite. So, while I was working, she couldn't resist coming to my home to exact her petty revenge. Wearing my clothes, sleeping in my bed, with my husband, and then flaunting it. That's why I contacted Ben. I hadn't shown him the photo Emily sent me, fearing he might become too enraged, call her immediately, and refuse to come catch them in the act with me. Nothing is more devastating than witnessing betrayal with your own eyes. The deepest wounds are always inflicted by those we trust the most. The silent treatment is like a slow, dull knife. It doesn't kill quickly, but it makes life unbearable. David began to change his behavior, becoming overly attentive. He, who rarely lifted a finger around the house, started cleaning obsessively, making the apartment spotless. He began preparing elaborate breakfasts. I ate them with a cold expression, saying nothing. While the food was objectively good, I offered no praise. I saw him bustling around the kitchen but pretended not to notice, retreating to the guest room afterwards. We slept in separate rooms. Our communication dwindled to almost nothing. If something needed saying, I used the fewest words possible. He took some time off work, claiming he wanted to spend time with me, make things up to me. Whether it was genuine or just a way to recover from his bruises and avoid embarrassment at the office, I didn't care. I continued with my own routine. If love was gone, I would focus on my career. But I watched him closely, observing the changes, specifically the physical changes. I have a sweet tooth. David, burdened by guilt and desperate to please me, started preparing sweet dishes and desserts for me, especially after my long shifts. I would take a few symbolic bites, still maintaining my silence, but allowing the icy expression on my face to soften slightly. David would seem thrilled by this tiny concession, eating his own portion with gusto, likely interpreting it as a sign I might eventually forgive him. He started noticing, however, that whenever he finished his entire meal, especially cleaning his plate of the rich, sweet foods, my mood seemed to improve marginally more. Around this time, his bruises healed, but he inexplicably started developing mouth ulcers. They came and went frequently. His insomnia worsened. Even increasing his melatonin dosage didn't seem to help much anymore. He began waking up in cold sweats during the night, sometimes jolting awake suddenly for no reason, even when the air conditioning kept the room cool. Occasionally, he ran a low-grade fever that kept recurring. Then, he started becoming forgetful. The first time I initiated a conversation with him since demanding the divorce was to yell at him for forgetting to turn off the main gas valve in the kitchen after cooking. He couldn't find his razor in the bathroom one morning. After he searched frantically for ages, I found it for him near the window in the living room. One day, I came home from my night shift to find he had closed the front door but hadn't locked it. I called him immediately and berated him. He tried to argue but ended up sighing helplessly, promising to be more careful. Later, I saw him returning with groceries, looking subdued. He didn't dare say anything and just quietly went into the kitchen. More recently, David started breaking out in hives for no apparent reason. The itching was intense, affecting even sensitive areas. He saw a dermatologist, underwent allergy testing, but they found no specific cause. Various anti-allergy medications provided only temporary relief. The hives would disappear, then return days later without any clear pattern, sometimes accompanied by a low fever. His constant physical discomfort, combined with anxiety and lack of sleep, tormented him, making him increasingly restless and irritable. Seeing him lose weight, looking haggard and worn down, filled me with a dark sense of satisfaction. "Are you still in touch with Emily?" I asked casually one evening as we ate dinner in near silence. "Don't you trust me?" David put down his chopsticks, looking angry, but his eyes lacked their usual fire. "That's not important," I replied, smiling faintly mockingly. "What matters is that you don't infect me with anything." A few days earlier, I had seen Emily come into the emergency room. She had been suffering from persistent nosebleeds that were difficult to stop. My words made David's face change drastically. "I'm full," I said, pushing my plate away. "Going to relax for a bit." He stormed off into the study and didn't come out for a long time. That night, when the apartment was quiet, I went into the study and checked his computer's browse history. I found searches like, what causes insomnia, forgetfulness, low fever, night sweats, mouth ulcers? What diseases cause recurring hives with no known allergen? What STDs are transmitted through high-risk sexual behavior? And early symptoms of HIV incubation period. Once someone starts fearing they have HIV, it's like opening Pandora's box. Fear, anxiety, and despair can consume them, pushing them towards a mental breakdown. When that seed of doubt takes root, it's almost impossible to remove. It grows relentlessly. How could I possibly miss the opportunity to nurture that seed? I decided I would use every subtle means possible to water it, encourage its growth. After all, some diseases have a window period for testing, typically 6 weeks to 3 months. Time was limited. The next day after work, I happened to see Ben, Emily's ex-fiancé. I noticed fresh scratches on his neck, suggesting another confrontation with Emily. Her recent social media posts hinted at trouble too. She had cut her hair short, styled it to cover the right side of her face, and looked utterly dejected. Her caption read simply, "Starting over." She had also been sending me nasty private messages, including some intimate photos of herself and David, clearly taken recently. Yes, they had started meeting secretly again. Once a cheater, always a cheater. I recalled David's tearful begging when I first demanded a divorce. It seemed utterly ridiculous now. Men lie so easily. His pleading was just a stalling tactic. If I didn't intervene to stir things up between them again, it would be a waste of David's dramatic performance and Emily's pathetic attempts to provoke me. David's paranoia about HIV seemed to have reached a peak. With just a little subtle suggestion from me, implying Emily might be the source of his mysterious ailments, he undoubtedly confronted her, finding an outlet for his fear and anger. Her attempts to cover her face in recent photos were likely the result of that confrontation. Feeling pleased with the progress, I decided to make a large, rich meal that night, knowing a thunderstorm was forecasted. After dinner, David seemed unusually thirsty, drinking glass after glass of water. Despite wearing light clothing, he complained of feeling hot and restless. "Can you sit still for a minute?" I asked mildly, pretending to browse on my phone but watching him intently. "It's going to rain," he grumbled, getting up to adjust the air conditioner again. "It feels so stuffy and hot in here." Sweat beaded on his forehead. I said nothing, just went to the bedroom, got a light long-sleeved shirt, and put it on over my clothes. Tonight, I decided I would sleep in the main bedroom with David. Since his symptoms began, his desire for intimacy had vanished. Even on the rare occasions he tried to be affectionate, a simple reminder from me about his time with Emily was enough to kill the mood instantly. "I'm tired, going to bed," David announced irritably, heading to the bedroom. I knew he was mostly angry with himself, with his own deteriorating state. When I entered the bedroom later, he was tossing and turning, unable to sleep. I got into bed and pretended to fall asleep immediately, but I remained alert. He got up several times during the night, either going to the bathroom or getting more water. Finally, he seemed to quiet down and drift off. Suddenly, the room was illuminated by a blinding flash of lightning, instantly followed by a deafening clap of thunder. David, finally asleep, was jolted awake. He sat bolt upright in bed, looking terrified, his face pale and drenched in cold sweat, gasping for breath. At that moment, another streak of lightning flashed outside the window. The intense light starkly revealed the pallor and fear on his face. Thunder roared again, and David visibly shivered. The storm raged outside, rain pounding furiously against the windows. To David, in his heightened state of anxiety and fear, it must have sounded like demons clawing to get in. The color drained completely from his face, leaving him looking ashen. He turned his head slowly and looked at me. I kept my eyes closed, carefully regulating my breathing to sound long and deep, feigning undisturbed sleep. He just sat there, staring blankly ahead, not moving. I had no idea what thoughts were racing through his mind, but his eyes looked vacant, lifeless. The rain continued its assault outside. I knew with certainty that the last fragile thread holding his mental state together had snapped on this stormy night. The next day, David developed a high fever that wouldn't subside. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering nonsensical things. I suggested taking him to the hospital, but during his lucid moments, he stubbornly refused, insisting he had just caught a chill from the storm. Fear of doctors, of finding out what was wrong, can be paralyzing. But honestly, I preferred it this way for now. I gave him some over-the-counter fever medicine. Luckily, I was off work that day, so I stayed home to monitor him. I wasn't playing the role of a dutiful, caring wife. I was simply ensuring that if his condition worsened dramatically, I would be the one to personally arrange his transport to the necessary facility. By evening, his fever finally broke. The flush left his face, but he suddenly became extremely irritable, finding fault with the simple porridge I had made for him. In the end, he turned his back on me, refusing to eat altogether. Might as well let the fever take him, I thought coldly. When he was left alone, however, he started mumbling to himself, seeming deeply depressed. Sometimes his eyes would glaze over, staring into space. I would call his name, and it would take him a long moment to register my presence. Sometimes he'd respond vaguely, other times he'd just look at me blankly before dropping his head again, lost in his own world. I recorded his behavior throughout the day on my phone. Watching him cycle through these states, my heart felt unnervingly light. It was working. Soon, I wouldn't have to wear this mask, wouldn't have to share a roof with him anymore. These past couple of weeks at living this double life had felt like an eternity. David didn't want to go back to the hospital, but I insisted, playing the role of the concerned wife. I patiently took him for a battery of tests: head CT, chest CT, MRI. All results came back normal. I then took him to the hospital lab for comprehensive blood tests, including STD panels and an HIV test. It was the weekend, so the results wouldn't be available until Monday. Ever since the blood draw, David had been incredibly tense. Some people, terrified of bad news, avoid doctors, clinging to the hope that no tests mean no problems. Next, I took him to the psychiatry department. I showed the doctor the videos I had recorded of his recent behavior. The doctor administered several standardized mental health assessments. Based on the results and my recordings, David was diagnosed with moderate bipolar disorder. He vehemently denied being ill and refused to consider taking medication. On that point, I silently agreed with him. All I needed was the official diagnosis on record at the psychiatry department to lay the groundwork for what was to come. "Sarah, you're a doctor yourself," the psychiatrist said kindly but firmly. "You know that besides therapy, consistent medication is crucial for managing bipolar disorder. I've written the prescription. Whether he takes it is ultimately his decision, but I strongly advise it." I accepted the prescription reluctantly, putting on a show of concern for David. Inside, I was overjoyed. I wanted to laugh out loud, but managed to restrain myself. I then arranged for David to get extended sick leave from his job. I told his boss he was suffering from recurring fevers that the local hospital couldn't diagnose, and I needed to take him to specialists elsewhere. Given the ongoing health concerns in the world, especially regarding fevers, his boss readily agreed, telling us not to rush back until David's condition was stable. My main reason for doing this was to further isolate him and also to subtly increase Emily's anxiety, knowing David was seriously unwell. After we returned from the hospital, even before the blood test results for STDs and HIV came back, David's mental state deteriorated rapidly. Sometimes he would just wander aimlessly around the apartment. Other times he'd burst into loud, nonsensical singing, only to abruptly fall into a deep, mumbling depression, his eyes vacant, like he wasn't really there. Occasionally, he would ask for the psychiatric medication, but then suddenly throw the pills away, exhibiting impulsive behavior and even expressing suicidal thoughts. In the end, I had no choice but to arrange for his admission to our local psychiatric hospital, using the diagnosis and records from his recent evaluation. After leaving him there, I called my mother-in-law to inform her. That's when I learned something significant. David's father had suffered from severe mental illness and had died by suicide, hanging himself when David was just 10 years old. David had witnessed it. I consider myself a rational person, guided by science. From a medical perspective, some mental illnesses do have a hereditary component, though bipolar disorder isn't always directly inherited. If he hadn't cheated, if he hadn't shattered our marriage and love, then even if he had developed severe depression or another mental illness, I believe I would have had the strength and commitment to support him through it. I would have done whatever it took, even selling assets to fund treatment or travel if it helped. But his betrayal changed everything. The hospital called me several times over the following weeks, saying David was asking to see me. I never went. I was busy initiating divorce proceedings. Because of David's documented mental condition, the divorce process was more complex than usual. But I was prepared. Our relationship was irrevocably broken. I provided the court with all the legally obtained evidence of his infidelity, presented chronologically. My initial discovery, the videos taken by neighbors during the fight, the police mediation records, Emily's provocative photos and messages, David's incriminating shopping history. I also included his recent medical records, the psychiatric diagnosis, video clips of me attempting to care for him while playing the role of a supportive wife, and recordings capturing my feigned fear during his more erratic episodes, showing me crying quietly in apparent distress. Ultimately, the court granted the divorce. Due to the circumstances, including the evidence of infidelity and David's condition, the majority of our marital assets were awarded to me. Considering his health issues, however, the court allocated a small portion to David. His mother immediately used his entire share to cover his ongoing hospital expenses. That money would likely keep him institutionalized for a very long time. One day, after the divorce was finalized, I took David's final lab report, the one confirming his STD and HIV status, and made a point of visiting him at the psychiatric hospital. The doctors had told me his condition was worsening. He had even started refusing to eat. I found David curled up in a corner of his hospital room. He, who had always been meticulous about his appearance, was wearing a dirty, disheveled hospital gown and didn't seem to notice or care. He was absently picking at the paint on the wall with his fingernails, his eyes hollow, murmuring over and over, "I'm not sick. I'm not sick." It had only been a few months since his admission, but he looked years older, completely devoid of his former confidence and energy. I chuckled softly. "Of course you're not sick," I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy. "What illness could you possibly have?" David seemed to register my voice. He lifted his head sharply, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even hope, flashing in his dull eyes. But it quickly turned into a furious glare. "Sarah, you planned all this, didn't you?" I shrugged innocently, smiling sweetly. What does any of this have to do with me?" He shook his head, seemingly trying to clear his thoughts, then suddenly lunged towards me like a wild animal. But the heavy iron security door of the hospital room was locked, with only a small, reinforced window allowing visibility. "Then why do I feel so awful?" he yelled desperately through the window. "Do I have AIDS?" I took the lab report out of my bag and waved it in front of the small window so he could see. "HIV negative," I announced clearly. "You're perfectly fine." "Then why—" he began to mumble again, confusion clouding his features. I smirked, leaning closer to the window, and explained slowly, savoring each word. "It's because of your diet, David, that you had those strange symptoms like mouth ulcers." I paused. "Why were you feverish, sweating, forgetful, allergic?" I laughed lightly. "Simple. I turned off the air conditioning sometimes at night. It gets hot in midsummer, doesn't it? Easy to get overheated and sweat. As for the fever, with the draft in our high-rise apartment at night, catching a chill is easy if you kick off the blankets." I chuckled again. "The forgetfulness?" "Oh, that was me. I deliberately moved your things around sometimes, like your razor. And I turned off the main gas valve in the kitchen that one time." I didn't bother explaining the hives. They were likely stress-related and had nothing to do with my actions. I also didn't mention that melatonin's effectiveness for chronic insomnia is limited, or that stress itself can cause many of his symptoms. "And Emily?" he suddenly asked, remembering her nosebleeds. "She kept having those random nosebleeds." I just smiled enigmatically and said nothing. I certainly wasn't going to tell him about a rare condition called nasal endometriosis, where endometrial tissue grows in the nasal cavity, causing bleeding synchronized with the menstrual cycle. "But," I finished, my smile turning smug and triumphant, "the bipolar disorder that you definitely have." "Sarah, you bitch!" David screamed, consumed by rage and despair. "I'll kill you. I'm not sick. Let me out." He started punching the reinforced glass of the window repeatedly until his knuckles were bleeding. Doctors and nurses rushed into the hallway. "Quick! Room 32 is having another manic episode," someone yelled. I pretended to look frightened by his outburst, but watched with cold detachment as a nurse administered a sedative injection through a port in the door. He soon stopped struggling, his movements becoming sluggish, slowly losing consciousness, till finally he slumped against the wall, completely quiet. As I left the hospital, I found myself humming a happy tune. Sick or not, who would ever believe the ramblings of a diagnosed mental patient claiming he wasn't sick? Several days later, after finishing my shift, I saw a man rushing into the emergency room carrying a young woman in his arms. "Doctor, help!" he yelled frantically. "She drank pesticide." I recognized the man instantly. It was Ben, Emily's ex-fiancé. Wearing my surgical mask, I discreetly peeked into the resuscitation bay. It was definitely Emily. She was foaming at the mouth, her breathing shallow and labored. Even from a distance, the distinct acrid garlic-like odor of organophosphate pesticide was noticeable. Later, I learned from a distraught Ben what had happened. After the incident at my apartment, he had broken up with Emily for good and demanded the engagement money back. That's when he discovered she had already given the money to her family to help pay the down payment on her younger brother's house. With the engagement broken and the money gone, Ben likely pursued legal means to recover it from her family. Emily's standing within her own family plummeted. She became a source of shame, the daughter who disgraced her parents, the sister who couldn't contribute financially. Around that same time, David went on his extended sick leave, fueling Emily's fears about potentially having contracted a serious illness from him, especially given her recurring nosebleeds. She apparently made multiple visits to clinics for blood tests, growing increasingly desperate. Eventually, unable to cope with the shame, financial pressure, health anxieties, and Ben's steadfast refusal to reconcile despite her pleas, she had threatened suicide by drinking pesticide earlier that day. The doors to the emergency treatment room swung shut. The doctors and nurses inside were working diligently, doing everything they could to save her. As for Emily, whether she lived or died, it was no longer my concern.